All right, we're going to talk about Bella Rosa and figuring out what something is worth. This should help both my buyers as well as my agents that are looking at this. Like, how do you explain this? Where do you look at it? I think a lot of people struggle with this concept, and so I'm making this video so it's easy. So first off, let's start with this. End of February, like right at the beginning of March of this year, a few months ago, 814 was the appraised value. I looked at this appraisal and felt the guy was used improper comps that were not in the neighborhood. You know, some of them were in the neighborhood, some of them were outside the neighborhood. You really can't use the outside the neighborhood when you have all inside the neighborhoods, because it's like a gated community to a non-gated community. There's a lot of things that it becomes apples and kumquats, not not apples and apples. But in any case, I let it ride. 814. All right. My estimation came 860 to 900 is where I was at. But at 814, we're just going to go with that. Now, let's look at the next thing. Comps. We look at what sold and what sold in 90 days. When it's older than 90 days, and then there's all sorts of variations of what's going on with the market. Is it getting, is it getting more expensive, less expensive, more whatever. When you go 90 days, you can say, well, we're pretty much in parity for pricing. So let's look at what 90-day solds are. So here are 90-day solds. These are 3 houses that sold in the last 90 days. They're in the Portasol community, which means they are apples to apples from that standpoint. The only difference is going to be square footage, right? Is the square footage of the house. Now, if we take a look at this, we got a 550, a 580, and a 690, and you would go, wow, okay, it's in the high fives, low sixes, right? This is where you would say. However, you got to look at square footage. 1,800, 1,800, 2,300, right? Well, our house is 3788. Well, 18 and 18 is 36, which means that our house is double both of these. Based on that, we'd have $1 million house, right? You'd say, well, it would take 2 of these to equal mine. So you'd logically take that and say, well, it's $1 million house. Okay, that just shows you it's up there. It really wouldn't be double that, but it'd be close to it. Same thing here, 23. You're at 690. That's still going to put you up there in the $1 million 950 range when you put that together. Now the next thing, and we're going to come back to value, and we're going to use a calculation for square footage difference to make that happen, and it'll bring all that in for you. The next thing is, what's my competition? Because I could do all this valuation based on the comps, and I could tell you that house is worth 780. But what am I selling against? What if a house similar to mine, close to mine, you could buy it for 600,000? Well, my 780 value might be great on paper, but in reality, if there's something that a buyer can buy cheaper, they're probably going to go that route, right? So we got to compare to that. So let's take a look at the actives. So here are the actives. Now, these are, I sorted them. They're in there's a 5-bedroom, 4, 4, 4, 4, 3 bedrooms, right? We've got 3,700 square feet difference. Now, this house is 700 square feet smaller than me, and they want 820. Okay? So that's where they put it. So you could buy a smaller house for 820. This house is 1,500. That's an entire house, right? That's an entire house. A 1,500 house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, got a garage. That's an entire house. And they want 799. So tells you we're in there. Here's a house. Now this is 31. That's 600 square feet. It's 820 as well. Of course, the number of bedrooms and all changed. This one here, 29. So that's 800 square feet. They want 729. 800 square feet smaller. So you can see what I'm getting to is that here we go, 1,800. I'm double that. Well, if they want 659, that means I'm a $1.2 million house, right? So that's, you got to put this logic to it. You just can't look at that number. You got to look over here. Now let's talk about values. Now first, I'm going to talk about what's wrong with the house. This is the things that people have come back to. I don't agree with all of them. In fact, I only really agree with one, but let's just look at all of them. So the first is the carpet. People hate the carpet. I agree. Carpet sucks. But if you went to Home Depot and you replaced all that carpet with a very nice Berber, installed everything, you're going to spend 10 grand right there. 10 grand installed. Beautiful Berber, brand new carpet. Going to last you a minimum 5 years, maybe longer. Sometimes people get 11 years out of it. Depends on what you track in the house and whether you eat anywhere in the house or you just leave it in the kitchen or what. All right. paint. People don't like the color sometimes. They don't. I don't think the house really needs to be painted. It could take some touch up maybe here and there, but doesn't really have to have paint. The colors aren't really offensive. So, but if you did, these are 5-gallon buckets of the best Home Depot paint there is. You need 6 of them. That's $1,600 in the physical paint. And then you got to have the labor to put it on. Okay. So that's $3 a square foot, 3,800 square feet, 11 grand for your painter, right? You don't like the appliances. They're all perfect. Stainless steel. They look good. They work good. Nothing wrong with them. But let's say, all right, I want to get rid of all my appliances. Okay. Well, you can go to Brand Smart. You can go to Home Depot. You can get an appliance package. You're not going to spend. That's the top of the market. I spend typically about $2,800 when I buy an appliance package. But let's just put it here. All right, that gives you your total cost updates what you would do, and everybody else is going to do this for you, right? The installer is going to come from Home Depot. The paint guy, you can get a Home Depot paint guy. You're going to be at that. Brand Smart's going to put the appliances in. So all you had to do was order it and pay for it. 27 grand. All right. So now let's jump to value. Let's see. I got to move my pretty face because my value is over here, this tab. All right. Let's jump to value. All right. If you remember in the solds, these were the 3 houses that sold, right? They were 550, 580, 690. Now, what were the differences? Well, the differences were the square footage. So what did we do? We said, how many square foot is this house short? 1897, 1897, 1424. So every one of these houses represent basically half of my house. There's a whole 1,800 square foot house, a big house. That's a whole nother house. So you take the comp value. Now, this is where we took the square foot adjustment. Now, they charge you on this thing $300 a square foot, 306, 291. In the adjustment, we only use 125. This is a typical amount that an appraiser, in fact, if you go to that appraisal report, you'll see they used $125 a square foot when they did the appraisal or the square footage adjustment. So if we do that, that brings this value. If this house was the same as mine, you'd be at 787. Same thing here. You'd be at 817. This one was the same, 868. So it takes these 3 houses and brings them up to my level for the adjustment and puts the values at that. Now, like I said, mine came out at 815, and at 815, that's $215 a square foot. You see my adjustment was only 125. So you probably got a difference here. Anyway, let's take now our values. So here's our 4 values. Let's take our repairs, 27 across the board. So what's our minimum value of our house? Well, it's somewhere in this range. It's somewhere. It's a 759, 789, 840, 787. It's somewhere in this range. Now, I will tell you, we had it listed for 785 and we didn't get an offer. That's why we put that ridiculous 510 price on it. So what I'm expecting is something 785 to not more than below this 759. I think that's your range you're going to be in of where you should reasonably say, I want to buy this house and this is how I'm making my offer, right? You should be somewhere in that range. All right, I hope this helped you get some logic behind, not just pulling numbers out your butt and going, well, this is what I want to pay for the house. Well, that's not how it works. Everything's negotiable, but you got to start with something at least close in the ballpark, something that makes sense to both parties. I think I just showed you on your end, this should make sense. I know it does on my seller's end. So you need to look at that and let's come up to something that's going to work.